Dr. Gates,
Yes, sir.
welcome to Cleveland, Ohio.
Nice to be back in Cleveland. I
Yes.
love Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you.
Sure.
I was thinking, when did I first come to Cleveland? When I went to Yale, the superior school at that time, Harvard man over there. And I was madly, junior item, Linda Darling, now Linda Darling Hammond, famous professor of education at Stanford, and she lived at Pepper Pike.
Ah.
So I would drive her home, and her father was an executive at Robert Hall, remember the clothing store?
Right. Uh-huh.
And so I used to come out here all the time.
Well,
So I have long and deep roots.
well, as you know, this is an area that gives its heart and its soul and its dollars like no place else in this country, as far as I'm concerned. Part of the goal of this summit is a phrase that I heard a number of people say at the foundation, to demystify philanthropy. Philanthropy is a big word. It intimidates a lot of people. You think of the Fords, the Rockefellers, the Cosbys, Oprah when you think of philanthropy. How do you demystify that word, and how do you convince everybody that they can make a difference?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I went to Harvard 22 years ago. And we had and I went there, as everybody knows, to rebuild African and African American studies. And I ended up, thank God, being very successful because I convinced really smart people smarter than I am, to join me. Cornell West, Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, William Julius Wilson, Anthony Appiah. You know, they called us the dream team. But I also realized, and we were generously funded by the administration, but I realized that if I was able to raise our own money, we would have more power, more authority. If you have your own money, you always have a place at the table. And so you know what I did? I did something I was told that no other Harvard professor had ever done this. I asked the Harvard Development Office to convene a meeting of all their development offices. Now, development at Harvard is a serious business, man. It is like nuclear science or something. They have a $35 billion endowment.
Wow.
They are geniuses at fundraising. They know. And they taught me. And so they convened a room like this, a couple hundred people. And this is 1991. And I stood up and I said, this is my vision for building the greatest center for African and African American studies in history. And at the end I said, I've done very well for myself. I knew how to raise money for myself, book contracts. I hadn't made any documentary films at that time. That would start 3 years later. But I said, I know nothing about raising money for an organization institutionally. And I said, I need your help, my people need your help to fulfill this vision. I got a standing ovation. And I just threw myself at their feet and I said, teach me how to raise money. Teach me how to be a vehicle for philanthropy, not only for African Americans who never give, to Harvard at that time, but also to white people and other people, who could be persuaded to give. So they said, okay, we're going to tell you the first lesson of fundraising. And I had a lovely dinner last night at Steve and Dolly Minter's house. We were talking about this. And they said, now we don't want to offend you. And we're off stage. This is politically incorrect what we're going to tell you. I said, oh, fire away. I said, I am politically incorrect. I'm the signifying monkey, so you can say anything you want. And they said, okay, there are 3 groups of people who will never give you any money. I said, really? They go, who? I said, who? He said, doctors, actors, and black people. Isn't that cold? But it was true. Doctors don't give money. They're doing the work of God. Actors think my name is enough for you to use to get people in the room who might give you money. And then black people would rather pay the government than to give you the money. They'd rather pay taxes. This is what they were telling me. So I had to figure out, how do you start to convince the black community and the graduates of Harvard,
right,
and then some of my friends from Yale, to give money? And so we started in baby steps. Because if you think about it, black people have a long tradition of philanthropy. We just don't know that. It's called the collection plate. We've been ponying up pennies and nickels and dimes and quarters for ages and ages. You know, the building fund. Remember the building? I never knew. Our building always looked the same. I never always wanted to know what happened to the building fund. I think that was the preacher building the Cadillac. But the building fund, okay, put the envelope in the building fund.
Right.
And so, to make a long story short, I began, and we were just talking about that, I began going around very, very slow. It's seduction. It is like romance. You know, there's so many of us who think, well, if I could only see Oprah and just tell her about the church that needs a new wing, and she would just write it. It doesn't work that way, you know. It's a long period of getting to know people, having them buy into your vision, or you. I think ultimately people give to an individual.
Yeah.
And as we were saying, I don't need a script to talk about African and African American studies. I love it. I live it. I breathe it. You know, it's a thing that you can smell inauthenticity. You know when somebody is reading a script. This is just my baby, and I try to make it infectious, and that people will pony. I'll give you a quick example. White guy, every year on Martha's Vineyard, I always summer on Martha's Vineyard, as everybody knows. And every August, we do a big event at the Old Whaling Church in Edgartown. So we have Lonnie Guinier, and Melissa Harris, Perry, Cornell, Mike Dyke, you know, debating on anything, affirmative act, whatever it might be. So 10 years ago, at the end of this event, which we'd been doing for about 10 years, this white guy walked in, big goofy white guy. He had on t-shirt, pair of shorts, and flip-flops. And he said, my 25th reunion at Harvard's coming up, and I've been watching you for 4 years, and I've decided to channel my donation to the Du Bois Institute. And I looked at him and I figured, actually, I thought he was going to ask me for a loan, because he didn't look like he had any money. And so, oh, hi, Mary Louise. I didn't even see you, baby. How you doing? And so 2 weeks later, I get a phone call. My secretary says, the head of the development office is on the phone. They were really angry. I go, for what? So I pick up the phone and they said, how do you know Glenn Hutchins? And I said, I don't know Glenn Hutchins, because I didn't catch this guy's name.
Right.
And they go, like hell you don't know Glenn Hutchins? I said, why? He said, because he just sent you a check for $1 million.
Wow.
And amen to that. That's what I said. And then I went, that must have been that big goofy white guy. You know? So, you know what I did? Russ, I went on the internet and realized this guy was really loaded, right? He's a billionaire now. And I Xeroxed his picture. I got a staff of 13 people. And I called a staff meeting. I go, if this man ever comes into this building, you find me wherever I am. Sit him down, give him a cappuccino. Then we created these circles of giving. So $1,000, $500, $1,000, $5,000, $15,000, $50,000 over a long period of time. And my model was hedge fund. You know, if somebody's trying to raise $1 billion, they don't get $1 billion from Oprah Winfrey. They get, you know, 100 people to pony up, or 1,000 people, whatever. You could do the same thing. And the key is to get people into the spirit and habit of giving on a regular basis, make them feel appreciated. We give them all the bells and whistles. Every time one of us at Harvard publishes a book, if I do a TV show, we give them a DVD, we give them the book, we invite them to our events. One time we redid Plessy v. Ferguson, you know, the infamous Supreme Court decision, when Leon Higginbotham, whom I hired, the great late federal judge, and who should be on the Supreme Court instead of Clarence Thomas. Hello. And we got Supreme Court justices, federal justices to sit there, and we had two professors at Harvard Law, both black, argue. Charles Ogletree and Randy Kennedy argued both sides of Plessy v. Ferguson. But you know who was in the audience, Steve? All the millionaires and billionaires I wanted to give us money to. You know, you have to, all these rich people know that you're trying to pick their pocket. They're not stupid. But you have to appeal to their mind and then hope the wallet will come behind. You know what I mean? And that's like picking up somebody in a bar, right? It is.
Let me help you out here. let me go to the next question, Skip. Let me help you out. Let me help you out on this one. A startling statistic that I heard, we talked about this earlier. African Americans give, $2.3 billion a year. 2/3 of African Americans donate to some type of charity. Do those numbers surprise you, and should they be better than that?
Well, I think that it's because of the church. I mean, if we looked at where people gave, I would imagine that most people in those statistics give to their church first. So, no, it doesn't surprise me. But I would want to see what the average per capita donation is, right?
Yeah. Well,
and then where it goes beyond the church.
What kind of variation of my first question? You talked about getting those millionaires into the tent. How do you get average Joe?
No, but that's why you develop circles of giving, whether it's $500 or $1,000. And we go to recent graduates and say, we want you to start giving back. And even if it's $100, no matter what it is, if you get in the habit, and they are bound to be successful. I mean, Lord, they're Harvard graduates. They're going to do well. So that you think long term. You can't raise money if your checks are bouncing. That is difficult. People can smell desperation. If you're in a hurry, you can't get money. People want to go with the winner. So if you have a long-term strategy, thinking, what's this kid, 22 years old, now going to be worth 30 years when he's 52, or when she's 52?
Right.
That's the way to build. That's how I see it, anyway.
The theme of this year's summit, inspiring 100 acts of African American philanthropy. You hear that? What does that say to you?
Oh, I think it's brilliant. I think that the main thing, I was thinking about that when I heard that phrase mentioned at the podium. The black upper middle class has quadrupled since that terrible day in 1968 when Dr. King was killed. And that's us. But the black underclass, as measured by the percentage of black kids living at or beneath the poverty line, is almost exactly the same as it was the day Dr. King was killed, about 30%, 35%. So that means that we have two distinct classes within the African American community. And most sociologists and economists behind closed doors will say they cannot see those, that division, those statistics, changing anytime soon. So most of us feel powerless when we look at the conditions affecting so many of our brothers and sisters. You know, we say the right thing and we really feel compassion, but what do you do about it? 70% of all black babies are born out of wedlock. That's amazing. That's 7 out of 10. 50% of, you all know all these statistics. How many black kids start high school and don't finish in 4 years? Over half. Functional illiteracy. How many basketball players I'm just speaking hypothetically, can sit down and read The Souls of Black Folk and pass an exam on it because of the way that our people have been exploited by the sports industry. You know, we could give a lot of examples. So the thing that's brilliant about 100 acts of kindness, 100 acts of philanthropy, is that it would force us all to figure out where we can actually make a difference. And most of us don't know that. We don't know what we can actually do with our dollars, no matter how small, in order to reduce the number of black kids living in poverty, to encourage kids to stay in high school. Look, when I was growing up, I was born in 1950. The blackest thing you could be was an educated man or an educated woman for the Negro people. I'm serious. Who are our heroes? Thurgood Marshall, Mary McLeod Bethune, Rosa Parks, Dr. King. We loved athletes and entertainers. That was important. We got off on that. But the real heroes of the race were the race men and the race women. Where'd that go? That went the way of the West Wind. And now we have to remind people that we too are people of the book. That our people, they defied the master of the plantation to learn how to read and write. And we have so many of our kids who have more opportunity than any of us had when we were 6 and 7 years old, who are squandering that opportunity in the name of what? Blaming white racism and the white man? Forget that, man. I have no sympathy for that. No sympathy for that.
You, of course, have been involved with the Cleveland Foundation since 1997, as you pointed out. How important are groups like the Cleveland Foundation in not only getting the word out, but also making sure that everything gets to where it's supposed to be?
Well, you know, Tip O'Neill said famously, all politics is local, right? All philanthropy is local too. And so you have to, when I was thinking, I was looking at the program, thinking about the format, and I thought, well, I wonder who would be in the audience. And I thought, no, they have to be all Cleveland people, because this is the Cleveland Foundation, and this is asking people to be generous and to think about social interventions for your own community. And so that is the most important thing, to have each of you buy into the present and the future of the town in which you live in, rather than trying to get, as I've said, the 5 richest black people in Fortune 500 to come in here and solve all your problems. You can't do that. So I think that it's brilliant what you're doing. And the turnout on a Saturday, that's amazing. And I really applaud you for that.
Fantastic turnout, definitely. As we talked about earlier, obviously you're a student, you're a scholar of genealogy. You believe in finding out who you are. When you look back at your history, why is it important, do you think, for people to know who they are, not just for health reasons, but for other reasons as well?
Well, let me say the reason that when you missed me at the reception last night was because I was in New York filming Sally Field for the new series. And we have Ben Affleck, we're about to do Tina Fey, did Sally Field. Last Saturday I did Valerie Jarrett. And we're going to do Deval Patrick very soon. So we have 30 guests in the new season. And last season, 29.6 million viewers watched Finding Your Roots. I'll tell you, when I started, as you know, I started with African American lives, 8 prominent African Americans. And I started with Oprah and Quincy and Chris Tucker, and it was a big hit. We had 8+ million viewers, 4-hour special. So then we did African American lives too. We had Morgan Freeman, Tina Turner. I tried to do the DNA on Tina Turner myself, but she wouldn't let me, so.
Do I need to help you out again?
No, no, with me, what you see is what you get. You know, you can change the subject, but I'll come back to it. So then I got a letter from a white woman who said she was of Russian Jewish extraction. And she said, Dr. Gates, you have been a proponent of multiculturalism, cultural pluralism, but I think you're a racist. You know, like, somebody accused me of being a racist. She said, how come you don't do Jewish people on your show? So, you know, my corporate sponsors were Johnson & Johnson and Coca-Cola. They were my lead sponsors. And the official at Coke was an African-American woman, one of my closest friends now, Ingrid Saunders-Jones, president of the Coke Foundation until last June when she stepped down. And I called her and I said, Ingrid, this is 2008. So I just got this letter. I'm holding this letter from this Jewish lady, called me a racist, and said, we ought to diversify the series and start doing white people. And I said, you think I could do white people? And there was this long pause, and she said, well, a lot more white people drinking Coke than black people. I went like, I guess that is a yes. So then I had to decide, well, how do you pick among all these white people? You know, I got the black thing down, right? But you know, a lot of white people out there. So I did what I thought Noah would do. 2 Jews, 2 Catholics, 2
2 by 2.
2 Asians.
Right.
And that segued into a weekly show called Finding Your Roots. I got the idea, the history of the idea really starts when I'm 9 years old. And I'm standing at my grandfather's casket. My grandfather looked like a white man. My grandfather was so white that we called him Casper behind his back. And so if he was that white with blood coursing through his veins, you can imagine how white he was dead. I mean, he looked ridiculous. He looked like he was coated in alabaster and sprinkled with baby powder, you know, and I'm holding my father's head and I'm looking at this corpse. And I'm trying to think, how did I descend from this man who looks like a ghost? And the next day, I bought a composition book. My father bought a composition book. It was the 4th of July, 1960. And we were coming back from the mill picnic, the colored mill picnic. There was a white mill picnic and a colored mill picnic. And we stopped at what today we call a convenience store. And Daddy bought me a composition book. And that night, in front of our little black and white RCA Victor television, I interviewed my parents, though I didn't know what this was called, about what we now call your genealogy or your family tree.
Wow.
Because I was trying to figure out what my connection was to that white-looking man. And that what I left out was, after the funeral, my father took us upstairs in his parents' house and showed us the obituary for the oldest Gates that we still can trace, Jane Gates, who was born in 1819 and died January 6, 1888. And he showed my brother, Dr. Paul Gates, he's an oral surgeon in New York, and me, her obituary. And the obituary said, died this day in Cumberland, Maryland, Jane Gates, an estimable colored woman. And that night, right before I went to bed, my daddy worked at the paper mill in the day, was a janitor in the evening, so we were the richest black people in town. You know, wealth is relative. I didn't know we were really poor until I went to Yale. Took a sociology class. I said, damn, I've been poor my whole life. I had no idea. So because my father worked 2 jobs, we always had the nice house, and I had my own bedroom, and my brother had his own bedroom, and I had stride right shoes every year, you know, all that stuff, and new textbooks. That stuff mattered, you know. I'm convinced that's why I'm sitting here today. And I always had a desk and a bookcase. And on the desk by my bed sat one of those, remember those red Webster's dictionaries? And the last thing I did before I went to bed, Russ, was look up the word estimable.
Wow.
Because I didn't know what it meant. And I thought, wow, that lady must have been special. And my father also showed my brother and me a picture of that woman, my great-great-grandmother. And so all that was swirling around in my head, and that's why I did my family tree the next day. So I was really hooked on this. And then after Roots, you could say, 1977, you could say, I had a terrible case of Roots envy. You know, I wanted to be like Alex Haley and trace my family tree back to the slave ship and then find the tribe or ethnic group we were from in Africa. But only Alex Haley could do that, right? And then in the year 2000, a black geneticist, just out of the blue, I mean, be careful what you wish for, the Bible says, for surely it'll be thine. I got a letter just over the transom from a black geneticist, Rick Kittles. Many of you know he now has a big DNA company called, whatever it's called, not African DNA, but I'll think of what it's called. And he said there was a new technology that allowed you to trace your ancestry back to Africa through your DNA, through your mother's line. And he was trying to get prominent African-American men to volunteer for this. And he couldn't get anybody. I couldn't believe it. I jumped on the phone. I called him right away. I said, I will pay for you to fly up to Boston. And the next day he came up and came to my house because I wanted to know, because I'd had this passion since I was 9 years old. Well, Rick Kittles is many things. He's a brilliant geneticist. But after 45 minutes, you see, you can see I have fantastic veins, right? Well, Rick Kittles took 45 minutes trying to find a vein in my arm, which led me to realize why no other black man had been stupid enough to let this brother. Anyway, and at that time, they had to take a lot of blood to get a sufficient amount of tissue. Now you just spit in the test tube. But this is the year 2000. And about 6 months later, it took a long time, he sent me things saying, this is where you descend from Africa on your mother's line. And in the middle of the night, I got up, frankly, to go to the bathroom, and a little while after that, and it was like a gift from God.
Wow.
I got this idea, it was like a bolt of lightning, I almost fell over, that I could do a documentary series on PBS, and I'd get 8 prominent African Americans, and I would do their family trees back to slavery, just like I'd tried to do when I was 9 years old. And then when the paper trail runs out, as inevitably it does for all of us in the abyss of slavery, then I'd do the DNA and announce what tribe Oprah Winfrey was from.
Wow.
And the next day I called Quincy, who would become a good friend. And Quincy's like a vampire. You know, he's up all night because he was a jazz musician. And he goes to bed when the sun comes up. So you can't deal with Quincy till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I waited till...
They're giving us the hook.
Oh, yeah, right. So I waited till about 3 o'clock, and I called him, and I said, Q, what if I could do for you what Alex did for himself? Because Quincy scored the music for Roots.
Right.
And he said, can you do that? And I said, yeah. And he said, does it hurt? And I lied and said, no.
And the rest is history.
No, you got to hear this.
You got to hear this.
And then in 30 seconds, these people ain't going anywhere. They're having a good time, man.
I'm getting dirty looks here.
I'm the only one going somewhere. I'm going to Boston. So just 30 seconds.
Okay.
And I wanted Quincy to be in it because I loved him, and I knew he liked genealogy. But why else did I want him? Because who's his best friend? Anybody? Oprah. And I wanted Oprah. Why did I need Oprah? Because I needed $6 million to do this series. And anyway, he told me that he would not ask Oprah to be in it, but he gave me Oprah's secret name and address. This is a lesson. And I said, what am I supposed to do with that, Q? He said, write her a letter, snail mail letter. So I thought, Russ, it was equivalent to putting a message in a bottle and throwing it in Lake Erie. But I wrote her this letter. I didn't hear. 2 weeks later, my cell phone rang. It was Sunday afternoon. Quincy calling. I said, Q, what's up? And a deep woman's voice said, Dr. Gates, this is Oprah Winfrey. I said, thank you, Jesus.
All right, that was worth it.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. All right, I'm getting dirty looks. We've got a few questions though from the audience. Can you take 1 minute, please, and answer these? So
sure.
They don't. I live here in Cleveland. I have to live with these folks. So
okay.
Please,
all right, that's great.
Okay. What are the biggest challenges facing the African American community that philanthropy can fix?
Well, reforming our schools. I mean, the key to progress, the key to citizenship, the key to social elevation is the ABCs, and learning them, the numbers table and the ABCs, and then metaphorically the new ABCs with computer science and et cetera, et cetera. And we have to reform our people's attitude toward the school system, but we also have to make the school system a place that nourishes young people and doesn't kill them, and doesn't kill their learning.
Next question. What has been the single biggest source of pride in your career?
Oh, being a father of 2 daughters.
That's nice. How do you research philanthropic strategies?
Locally. I mean, you would have, if I were you and you want to know how to make a difference in Cleveland, I'd sit down with Ron and the people who make a living, who are professionals at philanthropy and who know all of the programs out there that are meaningful. You know, there's so many, let's take the reform of the school. There's so many after-school programs. How do you know which ones really work? How many have actually been scaled up and have been analyzed statistically and shown over a period of time to have made a difference? You can't just pick one because your friends tell you about it or it makes you feel good. So you need, it's a science, and you need good advice.
Final question. If any one of us find ourselves in a barbershop or a salon and we have to make a pitch to people who have never given before, a pitch to people to say you should be philanthropic, you should donate, you should try to make a difference, what should that pitch be?
Well, I don't think you should do it that way because you could come across as condescending in a barbershop. You know, you can, when I go to the barbershop, I just want to hear people talking trash and telling stories, you know. I do, and I want to tell them and laugh and, you know, watching hear about Beyonce and the latest whatever tape and the, you know, who, and also their take on Obama and, you know, whatever.
Right.
But if you could say, you know, Bernard, who's one of my best friends, who owns the New Image Barbershop where I get my hair cut every 10 days, they're having a meeting they're having a philanthropy summit at the Cleveland Foundation, if we were in Boston. I think it might be something you're interested in. Why don't you come? And that way he comes, he gets hooked, and then the spin-off effect is enormous because he's there telling people, he's cutting heads every 30 minutes. And he goes, hey man, you know, you need to be ponying up $100 doing blah, blah, or we're trying to get, the same with and in his case, I know he would be interested in responding to that bait because he's always getting brothers do their blood pressure. He has blood pressure clinics right in the barbershop and things like that, cholesterol. So that's how I would do it. Again, you can't be in a hurry. And you can't come across like a missionary, you know, putting your finger in somebody's face, because they'll tell you to kiss off. You know, nobody wants to be talked down to. And you have to be a long-distance runner, not a sprinter.
We will see you again in September.
I'll be here.
Henry Louis Gates, thank you.
Thank you.
It was great. It was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.